Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Currents session. My name is Kriti Jindal, and I'm the product manager for Currents and also part of the product management team for Spaces. We're very excited for you to be joining us today. I'm going to walk you through a quick overview of Currents and Spaces. We'll then take a look at a side-by-side comparison of features that are supported in Currents and how that experience will look like in Spaces. And we'll then do a deep dive into the migration strategy and what you can expect leading up to the migration, which is next year. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please post them in the live chat, and I will make sure to answer them as best as I can as we move along the presentation. So when we look at Currents, there are three areas where Currents does a good job. As a social platform, it has tools that allow for community building and also allows members to be able to engage with the content. Currents also does a good job of allowing users to discover communities that they're interested in or that are relevant to them. And it also highlights information that is being shared across communities and also makes it easy to share information at scale. But the tool has certain limitations. One, because the tool, it's a separate tool, users need to develop a new habit to specifically navigate to the tool to consume content. This essentially is creating information silos, and we have heard from customers that only a subset of the users in their organization are actually engaging with the content, and that's because only a subset of the users are using Currents actively. Currents also has a limited set of admin capabilities, which impacts the ability for admins to moderate content or be able to manage communities and membership at scale. The enterprise tools for Currents are also limited, and so it impacts, again, the admin's abilities to be able to protect their data. We also looked at user research around how communication and collaboration use cases are evolving across organizations. And what we see is that the communication needs for our organizations can be bucketed across 5 pillars. And among these 5 pillars, the first 2 are really around goal-oriented or team-oriented collaboration that tends to happen with a small group of people, which is anywhere from 3 to 50 members. And on the other hand, we see communication scenarios which tend to happen across a large group of people. And these are things like communities where people are discussing social topics. And so these are more around use cases to be able to connect with other people. There are also communities that are being used to share knowledge with a large group of people. And then lastly, communities which are being used to broadcast certain important information, so things like announcements or leadership communication. So after looking at how the communication and collaboration needs are evolving for organizations, and also looking at the strengths and limitations of Currents, our approach with Spaces is to integrate it into Workspace and meet people where they are. Because Spaces is directly built into Workspace and also integrated with Gmail, people have access to everything that is important to them in the same tool. From social forums to announcements to team-based channels for collaboration or emails, everything is in a single tool, and users do not need to develop new habits to use a separate tool to get the information they're looking for. Because Spaces is directly integrated into is part of Workspace, users can also leverage other tools such as docs and drives, which are seamlessly integrated into the experience as part of using Spaces. Spaces also offers a first-class community experience. We're investing in features to make sure we're investing in features to ensure that the experience is optimized for community engagement. Spaces is built to be used for different types of communities, from your team-based collaboration to even large social communities like the one we have here for cat lovers within Google. And throughout, for all types of communities, you have access to features such as inline replies that maintain the context of the conversation, or even a broad set of emojis, which is different from Currents, which only supported a like reaction. With the broad set of emojis, the conversation becomes more fun and engaging. Spaces also supports rich text formatting, so you can add font, images, and links to your posts and make them stand out. We also saw, as part of the user insights or the communication insights, that announcements is also important for organizations, and so Spaces does support that, where posting can be restricted to a certain group of people who can then broadcast the information to a set of members. This can be used for things like leadership communication or announcements. And because all of this is built into chat, it ensures that users are not missing out on any important notification. As part of Spaces, we're also investing in features like discoverability of a space. And you can use this to configure whether a space is private and available to a certain set of members, or it can be discovered by various users within your organization. As part of the improvements in Spaces, we're also offering robust moderation capabilities. So for example, if there is content within the space that doesn't align with the guidelines of the space, that content can be deleted by the moderators. There are also features to be able to manage membership for various spaces as well. And Spaces is also enterprise optimized. We saw how Currents is lacking capabilities for admins as well as enterprise tools. And so we're building those into Spaces, where it is integrated with Vault, so you can control for how long your data is retained. We're also adding admin capabilities, so you're able to better manage your data and better manage and protect your data, as well as be able to manage communities and membership at scale, which has been a problem with Currents in the past. So now let's take a look at a side-by-side comparison of both Currents and Spaces. So we will walk through some of the most common scenarios that were used in Currents and take a look at how that experience might look like in Spaces. So just quickly, when we migrate the content over, this is showing how this is showing that on the day of migration, what features will be available in Spaces and what are some of the features that are still in progress and will be available post-migration. So in terms of communities and all the features related to community building and engagement, those will be part of Spaces as soon as you migrate. And things like some analytics data or admin reports around communities and managing membership across all communities, that will be something that is part of the roadmap and will be available post-migration. And one thing I do want to call out is the social newsfeed. That is something that is available in Currents. It's not available in Spaces. I also want to call out that the social features in Currents, like the newsfeed, actually had low usage. Moving forward, this will not be available in Spaces. So let's start off with how communities that you're part of in Spaces, communities that you're part of in Currents, what that would look like in Spaces. So here on the left, you got a list of all the communities that you were part of in Currents, and this will essentially be translated into this will essentially get translated to Spaces you're part of. So as part of migration, the community name, the membership, everything will be migrated over. Even the description of the communities will be part of Spaces and will appear in Spaces description. Then communities you can discover become Spaces you can discover. So in Currents, you could search for a community and take a look at if that community was available. Similarly, on the Spaces side, you can search for space. You can search for a specific space or browse from a list of spaces that are available for you to join. And once you do find the community you're interested in, you can just as you were able to preview the content in Currents, you can similarly preview the content in Spaces as well before you go ahead and join the community with a join button that's available to you. Now let's look at how scenarios such as actually engaging within the community will work, both like how it used to work in Currents and what it would look like in Spaces. So in Currents, if you wanted to post to a community, you would create the post, and then as part of posting, you would select the community you want to post it to. On Spaces side, you select the community you want to post the content to, you create the content, and then you go ahead and post the content. In currents, what we saw inline replies, and they were essentially comments that were being added to posts. On the Spaces side, it would be the same, where for a specific post, if you want to post a comment, you would essentially do an inline reply, and the context is, and you can then, the context is maintained with the conversation, and you can click on the replies to see all the replies that were associated with that post. And again, with emoji reactions, the like reactions that were available in currents will be migrated over as a thumbs up reaction in Spaces. But moving forward, users will have access to all the other emoji reactions as well. So you would have you're not restricted to just the like reaction in Spaces. And here we just want to show quickly that all the features that we just walked through on the web are also going to be available on mobile. So the experience, as you can see here, of actually commenting on a post on currents becomes essentially doing an inline reply on Spaces. So let's switch gears and now talk about actually before we switch gears, I quickly wanted to mention that as part of migration, all posts and comments and all posts will be migrated as messages in Spaces. Comments will be migrated as inline replies, and we talked about the reaction being migrated as thumbs up. So let's switch gears and talk about the migration strategy and next steps leading up to the migration next year. So first and foremost, as we look at the migration, we wanted to make sure that this is a very seamless migration for our customers, and we wanted to make this an easy process. We also wanted to make sure that communities only live in one tool at a time, so users don't have to go to 2 different tools to consume the information. So with that in mind, we essentially have these 3 things that we considered as part of how migration will work. So firstly, the migration is actually an optional migration. So if you want to migrate your data from currents to Spaces, we're asking you to opt into the migration in the admin console. You have until the end of this year to opt in. And again, if you opt in today, and let's say you change your mind later this year, you have the ability to opt out. So it's not a final decision if you do so today, but the decision will be locked by end of this year. So if you do want the content to be migrated, please opt in. The migration, based on this migration opt-in, we'll be publishing a calendar in January so that you know exactly which date you'll be migrated on. Not all customers are going to be migrated on the same day, so that's why we're going to be publishing a calendar so you have that date available to you. And again, as part of the migration, it's Google who's going to be doing the migration for you. There's no step needed for you as long as you, other than actually opting into the migration. Now, as I mentioned earlier, communities will only live in one product at a time. And so on the day of migration, all the communities will, and the post and all the data that it will be migrated over to Spaces. And once the migration is complete, currents is actually offline. So even on the day of migration, currents effectively becomes offline for your domain. Once the migration is complete, users, instead of going to currents, they would now go to Spaces to essentially access the same communities and continue the conversation across those communities. And it is a big bang migration. And what we mean by that is that the migration will happen in one day. We want to make sure it is, it's as fast as possible. We want minimal disruption for your business. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure this is a lightweight, fast process as part of the migration. As we look at, when we looked at the data that is to be migrated from currents to Spaces, we also noticed that there are a lot of communities that have actually been inactive or they don't really have any members. So we decided to reduce the noise as part of the migration. And so if you have communities that haven't been active since July 2020, essentially they have had no posts since July 2020, those communities will not be migrated. Or if there are communities that have 0 members, those communities will also not be migrated. And in general, for all communities, any community that is being migrated only data since that has been created since July 2020 will be migrated over to Spaces. So I'll talk about this again. So if you go to your admin console and look at the admin reports for communities, if there are communities in there with 0 members or communities in there that have no data since July 2020, those communities will not be migrated over. And in general, for all communities, only data that is data that is older than July 2020 will not be migrated over to Spaces. So if you want access to that data, or in general, if you want any access to that data that is not being migrated, you are able to do a takeout of, you're able to do a domain-wide takeout so that you can download that data and so that you can download that data and it is not lost as part of the migration. So again, let's look at the timeline here to see how the migration, like what you can expect leading up to the migration next year. So we sent out an MSA earlier this year informing you about the migration and the fact that you can start opting into the admin console. And that is still, again, as we mentioned, it's going to be available until end of this year. We will actually be sending out another reminder email so that you can opt into the migration. It's available until December 31st. And starting now until January 2022, starting from now and until June 2023, you're able to do a domain-wide takeout and essentially download currents data if that's something that you want to do. Now, in January, we're going to publish a calendar that will show you the exact date that you're going to be migrated on. And next year, we'll also start putting up banners within the product. So in Currents, you will see banners that will inform users about the upcoming migration. And so this is something, so users can essentially start preparing. And if there are some users who missed out on internal communication, they would know through in-product usage that there's an upcoming migration. And Spaces features that are related to communities and essentially all the features that you use today for community building will be available on the day of migration. And analytics and admin reports are something that will come post-migration. Our goal is to be able to migrate all users by June 2023. So we'll finish the migration by then, and that's also the last date for you to do download of the data if that's something that you need. Beyond June 2023, Currents data download will not be available. Another thing I actually want to call out that I missed earlier is that on the day of migration, Currents will become offline for your users, and also 2 weeks prior to the date that your domain will be migrated, you will no longer be able to create new communities. You will still be able to engage and post content in existing communities, but you will not be able to create new communities. And again, we'll put checks in place in the product as well, but I just wanted to mention it here as well that new community creation will be limited closer to the migration. Okay, I now want to quickly talk about some features or some data that will not be migrated to Spaces. Spaces and Currents are different products, and they're different in important ways. Our goal is to be able to migrate as much data as possible, but there are limitations to some of the data type that we can migrate over. So, for example, videos are something that won't be migrated to Spaces. In Currents, videos that are shared are actually posted to YouTube, which is outside of your enterprise control. Polls are another feature that are not inbuilt into Spaces. And so any content or data associated with polls is also not going to be migrated over. In general, the usage of both of these features is very low across all the customers. Another data that won't be migrated over is domain-wide posts. These are essentially posts that are posted outside of a community and just to the general domain. These will not make it into Spaces either. Next, we have personal posts. These are essentially posts so Current supports this feature where you can post content to either just yourself or to a group of people. It's like, it's like your own profile, so to say, or something like a quick chat to a group of people. These posts will also not be migrated over to Spaces. Reshares is another feature that is available in Currents, where when a post is posted in the community, it can be reshared by people across other communities, or even to the domain. Um, this capability is currently not supported in Currents, and so we'll not be migrating this over. The original content that is created, that will be migrated. It's just the reshared content is something that won't be migrated over to Spaces. And lastly, Current supports categories within communities where posts can essentially be categorized under these labels or categories, and these categories are not going to be migrated over to Spaces. So again, all the content or posts will be migrated, but not the categories associated with the posts. So that was all that I wanted to present as part of the Currents migration. And again, please opt in to the migration through the admin console if you want Google to migrate over your data. There are everything that I went over specifically in terms of the migration timeline and features on how they will map to Spaces, or the features that won't be migrated. All of this information is available in our help document, which I will link again in the chat. I also want to acknowledge that there will be some change management that you will have to do within your organization, and so we will be putting together some documents that you can use for managing this within your organization or communicating with the users. And lastly, I would love to understand if this session was helpful, and if not, what we can do to what we can do to help you through this process and better answer any questions related to migration. So it's a quick survey. I'll post the link down in the chat as well. Please let me know what other information we can provide to make this process easier. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope this was helpful, and I really appreciate you all joining us today. Thank you.